Дорогие коллеги, добрый день.
Colleagues,
У
hello,
меня
everyone.
контрольный вопрос. Мы видим друг друга, слышим друг
Okay,
друга.
can you hear us? Can you see us? Let's check.
Мы ничего не видим. Супер.
Okay,
Okay.
that's great.
Okay. Albert, I'm very glad to see you in good condition. Yeah.
Likewise, nice to be here. Thank you for
Добрый
joining
день.
us.
Рада, что вы в добром здравии. Спасибо, что к нам присоединились.
Отлично. Отлично. Я очень рад
Okay, that's
приветствовать.
great. It's my pleasure to welcome everyone.
A really honor for me and a really great pleasure to open our conference together.
Не слышно.
Ну вот.
Да, слышно. Говорите, говорите.
Раз, два. Слышно?
1, 2, 3, testing. Can you hear me now?
Okay.
Yes, we can.
Dear Albert Yarsot, a really honor for me, a great pleasure to open this ceremony together with you.
Удовольствие открывать вместе с вами данную церемонию.
We wait this moment a long time, but now it is, we start. I also I'd like to welcome esteemed Christian Kerbel,
Уважаемых коллег, в том числе Кристиана Кербела,
National Member Organization of Austria,
председателя Австрийского комитета ИАСА, Австрийской академии наук,
Leo Kauppi, Chairman of National Member Organization of Finland,
также хочу
in Institute of
приветствовать
Applied Analysis. Okay.
наших коллег из Синергии, председателя Финского комитета ИАСА.
And I would like to welcome esteemed Barent Mons, President of Codata, Codata President.
Президента Codata.
Особые слова признательности я хотел бы произнести в адрес
Let me sincerely thank
организаторов встречи, хозяйки этой встречи здесь.
the organizers and the host of this meeting,
ректор
Alevtina Chernikova, the rector, the head of
профессор, доктор
Mrs. Professor, Doctor of Sciences.
Также я хотел бы обязательно произнести
It's
теплые
my
слова в
pleasure
адрес нашего активного участника Алексея Жерменовича Гвишани,
Welcome
председатель комитета по системному анализу Российской академии наук,
head of Committee on Systems Analysis of the Russian Academy of Sciences,
комитета и Национального комитета по данным для науки и
and
техники
head of
Международного
National
научного
Committee
совета.
of Codata,
Академика Российской академии наук.
Academician of the Russian Academy of
Я
Sciences.
позволю себе выразить такую мысль, что
Let me also mention
более чем десятилетней активной работе
that
Академии Гвишани вместе
the
с коллегами
more than
у
decade
ИАСА
of
мы имеем тот
efforts
научный
from
бэкграунд,
Alexei
по которым сейчас
Gvishani
развиваем наши совместные программы. Спасибо вам большое.
have resulted into our joint meetings and our joint programs. Thank you very much for this.
Ну, я хотел бы продолжить свое приветствие буквально несколькими фразами.
Let me say just a few more words.
Приветствия вот со стороны, скажем, московской половины участников. Сегодня в Москве жарко очень погода, чудесный
Now it's
день,
pretty
такое ощущение, что
warm
погода какой-то
in Moscow.
дельта выброс температуры.
So
Сегодня в Москве
it's
26 градусов тепла.
it's
Это очень
pretty
необычная
hot,
температура для этого периода.
around 20, which is quite unusual for this time
Для
of
нашей
the year.
совместной будущей работы. Я думаю, что наша вот эта трехдневная встреча
I
отражает ту
think that
важную роль, которую
our
играет современный
conference
системный
of
анализ
3 days
в
will shed some light on the importance of systems analysis.
И думаю, что вот сам факт проведения этой
And I think
встречи
that the fact
свидетельствует
that we
о
are
том,
meeting
что
today
вот то, что мы называем часто научной дипломатией, вот это и есть
And
научная дипломатия, которая работает
means that we are practicing science diplomacy. So it's science diplomacy in action. I'd like to say that we are living through really tough times now, globally, and IIASA and us have jointly established one of the first international programs and events to approach fundamental virusology issues. So this program is really important as well. I'm confident that our meeting is going to be really fruitful. I'd like to highlight some progress meaning that now more attention is given to science diplomacy. In 2015, we had a meeting and we discussed standalone conferences on science diplomacy and what can be done in this field, and how science diplomacy can assist, say, real diplomacy. We're trying to establish a working group, and members of about 160 countries participated in that council meeting. They supported this initiative. 2 weeks ago, we had a meeting of the leading global science foundations, and there many countries raised the issue of adding to the agenda the issue of science diplomacy. I'm confident that our conference will help design new research methods and approaches to reinforce our joint effort, including mathematical methods and other methods. The quality of the sound coming from the Mrs. side is really poor. The interpreter apologizes. He can hardly hear the speaker. Our event will support the active progress we have enjoyed in the field of big data. The whole world is now thinking about artificial intelligence and how it can help us address the issues we are facing. I wish you the best of health and a fruitful meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Vladislav, colleagues, let me welcome you. Okay, Vladislav has given me the rights of the host for a short time, and I will ask Albert van Jaarsveld to take the floor.
Thank you very much. From my side, I'd like to wish you all a warm welcome from IIASA. And I'd like to also thank Accommodation Panchenko, Alexei Givisiani, and Alevtina Chernikova for joining us for this very important opening session, together with all our partners that are part of this particular session. As you know, this is a hybrid event, and we'll be joining physically with colleagues from the Mises studio in Moscow, together with the Zoom conference that you may be part of as well. We will be broadcasting the proceedings globally on Mises and the IIASA YouTube channels. And we have a wonderful array of speakers lined up over the next 3 days, both from Austria, Belgium, Egypt, Finland, India, Iran, Israel, Japan, New Zealand, Russia, and the US. So it's a very broad participation that we're very excited about. This particular conference is the Systems Analysis in Eurasia conference. Is the third in the series of IIASA regional conferences. The first was held in Rio de Janeiro in September 2019. The second in Africa, in Pretoria, in December 2019. And now this third meeting happening in April of 2021. We are delighted that we can move ahead with these initiatives, and we will also be looking at a broader Asia meeting to be held in Beijing towards the end of this year. We have an exciting agenda for you, focusing on science diplomacy, as you heard from Vladislav earlier, systems analysis, forests, and data issues. And we would want everybody that's participating to please use freely the comment box that is below the Zoom functionalities. And also to look and join us on the live stream on the video on the IIASA website, which is we will share with you on our comments and chat boxes so that you can actually log in there if you wanted to. We also have a very exciting poster presentation. I think it's the first time I've come across a poster presentation online, and so we're looking forward to that as to how innovative the various participants would be to try and make sure that we have a very thorough engagement with them. And the winner of the Best Poster Presenter will hopefully join us at the regional conference in China towards the end of the year. And so we will invite all of you to please vote for the best poster and make sure that one of the participants can join us at that follow-up conference as well. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank all the conference partners, the Russian Academy of Sciences, the Russian Foundation for Basic Research, the National University of Science and Technology, Mises, Austrian IIASA Committee at the Austrian Academy of Sciences, the Finnish Committee for IIASA, the Committee on Data of the International Science Council, Codata, as well as support from Systems Analysis Committee of the Russian Academy of Sciences and the Geophysical Center at the Russian Academy of Sciences. Thank you so much for your support and collaboration in this very exciting venture. And I hope all of you will enjoy your sessions, will enjoy the engagement, and that we can all learn something about systems analysis and its applications across the broader Eurasian environment. Thank you very much for this opportunity, and have a good day.
Yarshus, thank you very much. Алевтина Черникова, пожалуйста.
The floor goes to Alevtina Chernikova. Thank you very much, Vladislav, colleagues, scientists, researchers. Let me welcome you at NAST Mises. We are really honored to host this important event. Systems Analysis in Eurasia. I'd like to thank the organizers, the Russian Foundation of Basic Research, the International Institute for Applied Systems Analysis, and other organizers. I'd like to thank the Russian Academy of Sciences, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Thank you for compiling this really interesting agenda for young and other scientists, for those who take their first steps in this field. Colleagues, I'd like to thank the experts those who decided that we are going to broadcast our conference. And this means that our scientists globally can hear important things on systems analysis. And today, and tomorrow, and the day after tomorrow, we will discuss new ways to tackle the global challenges. We'll discuss the way we can use systems analysis. Well, we understand that national and global challenges cannot be addressed without science. So I'm confident that science will help us find solutions to many global challenges. And we can see that systems analysis is gaining importance with time.
Достаточно иметь большую скорость для того, чтобы найти те единственно правильные решения.
And we need to move fast to find solutions to the problems we are facing now. Colleagues, I wish you the best of health and a productive event. And I wish you a really interesting project. NAST Mrs. is always welcome to new proposals. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Christian
Keber, the floor is yours.
Okay. So hello. From my side, my name is Christian Kerbel. I'm the chairman of the Austrian National Committee for IIASA, the national member organization of IIASA. Austria is the Austrian Academy of Sciences. I'm not sure. Am I online now, or should I go ahead? Okay. So anyway, the Austrian Academy of Sciences is the national member organization of IIASA in Austria. And Austria also is the host country for IIASA. And that is for a good reason, of course, because Austria is a neutral country. We are one of the United Nations host countries as well. And Austria offers the space of IIASA at no cost. We have had a lot of interactions between IIASA and the Austrian science community, as well as the Austrian representation at IIASA. We have held, for example, over the last approximately 10 years, 1 to 2 joint IIASA Austrian Academy lectures annually. The last one was just yesterday with Sir Peter Gluckman on COVID-19 recovery towards a just and sustainable society. Over the decades, over 60 Austrian institutions were collaborating with IIASA, and that has led to approximately 2,000 joint scientific publications in this period. Most importantly, also for the Austrian science community, IIASA is a great asset for research excellence in Austria. After the University of Vienna, where I happen to be also a professor, IIASA is in the second position with the number of highly cited researchers. And so it is really positively influencing the national research environment in Austria. Also, there's a lot of capacity building going on. More than 30 Austrian early research scientists have participated in the Young Scientist program at IIASA. So, from our point of view, the connection between Austria and IIASA has been a great success story, and we hope that this continues. Next year is the 50th anniversary of IIASA, and we're looking forward for the next 50 years of great joint work. And one of the expressions of this joint research also is that the Austrian National Committee on IIASA is co-organizing this particular meeting. And I would like to acknowledge here in particular Dr. Victor Bruckmann, who is the secretary of the Austrian National Committee for IIASA, who has been essential in organizing various parts of this meeting. So I would like to wish all participants a great meeting. I think this is a very timely event because especially in these days we find out how important international connection and networking in research is. I wish everybody a great meeting, and I would like to thank especially our hosts in Russia, in Moscow, particularly Academician Panchenko. Thank them for the collaboration, and have a great meeting.
Спасибо. Thank you very much. A very warm speech. Thank you. Now I would like to represent the chairman of Finland National Committee of IIASA, Leo Kauppi.
Thank you, and good afternoon from Helsinki. It's really a pleasure to participate in this opening session of this important conference. First of all, I would like to thank all the organizers, particularly, of course, our Russian organizers and IIASA for all the efforts that you had to make before get this conference happen during these difficult times. But finally we are here, and I think it's great because the conference is particularly relevant now. I mean, by now I think we all certainly have recognized that we really live in the world of strong and complex interlinkages and interdependencies in our societies and in the whole world. And unfortunately, the challenges that we face and we have to be able to tackle in order to safeguard our sustainable future, these challenges do not come to us one by one, but in a package which makes the role and importance of systems analysis particularly crucial. I think in all our countries we know that we need really major transformations in our energy, food, transport, and industrial production systems. But how do we find combinations which are sustainable in really all dimensions, which are just and thus acceptable for people, and thus also politically realistic? These are the questions that we all face, and we are looking for answers. And certainly Finland, and I think no country can solve these problems alone. And therefore, we are really happy to collaborate with IIASA and I would say the global IIASA family. In fact, Finland has a very long tradition in collaborating with IIASA at many levels. Of course, scientific community has worked with IIASA since, in fact, the beginning of IIASA. But also, as academician Panchenko talked about science diplomacy, but also science policy interface, I think is really important there. And IIASA has really helped our policymakers in solving various issues in the past, and this collaboration is ongoing, including, in fact, our Prime Minister's office. There are excellent recent examples of these studies, like integrative assessment of plausible futures of the Arctic, and closely related to these transformations needed. IIASA has worked with us on Finland's resilience against the global shocks, as well as structural changes that are needed in the Finnish economy. These are just examples, but I think they also how fruitful this collaboration has been and can be. And I personally see that this conference is really an important step in the further strengthening of collaboration between IIASA and all its NMOs. And therefore, the Finnish IIASA committee is happy to be one of the co-organizers of the conference, and I wish you all very fruitful discussions and successful conference during the coming days. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Алексей Владимирович Гвишани, академик Гвишани, Комитет по системному анализу Российской академии наук. Прошу вас.
Alexei Gvishani, Systems Analysis Committee of the Russian Academy of Sciences. Thank you very much. I'd like to mention a few words about science. Well, it started in Brazil, then it moved to South Africa, then moved to Moscow, so then you will move to China, as you mentioned, and this is a really big thing. Well, IIASA is positioned as a very good, leading institute, providing great conditions for people and for science. So this is a unique place for science. So you can work, you don't get distracted, you don't have to pay taxes, so you don't have to do basically anything but do your work. And you can go for a walk in a beautiful park. Well, that's the way it used to be. And so we can see that the new director brought some new activities on the table, and now IIASA is with us, and this is the first and great experience. So I could say a few words in English, but I'm trying to say it in Russian for the benefit of the Russian speakers to follow me better. Okay, so why is this conference important in this specific time? Well, the pandemic is there, we understand this. And I'd like to say that IIASA is taking an active role in fighting this threat, including fundamental research, and we have a joint program And we see that scientists from different fields are tackling this issue. And we have a grant for the Geophysical Center of RAS and IIASA joint research. And the important thing is that we are reinforcing our face-to-face collaboration. And we can see that now we are living in a very interesting time. Well, the big data theory became part and parcel of data science. So we can see that this is happening now, and this wasn't possible before because we didn't have a clear goal, and now we have this goal, we have this vision. We can make the big data move globally. We can see that IIASA is very well equipped for this task. They have supercomputers, and we can install more facilities there and to have this super big data capacity. And the Russian scientific data can also play a role in this process. So we can see that IIASA is having a world tour now, and we are honored to be a part of this tour. I'd like to mention that every region should put on the table the topics of interest. On behalf of the Russian Academy of Sciences, I can say that we are really interested in the data science field. We are interested in the axioms of big data. Not only big data. Now we are in a tremendous time of the paradigm shift. Any type of research usually asked the question, why? And now we can see that we are even trying to understand what exactly it is, what we are trying to research. So we are trying to move ahead in this field of solving an issue and gaining momentum. And for this, we should know this, we should know reasons. Why in China, and where in China coronavirus came from? Who was the first person contracting the disease? And so we need to see what correlates with the coronavirus issue. Okay, people who take a lot of vitamin C and those who take aspirin, are they less vulnerable to coronavirus or not? So these correlations would be great discoveries if they were made. So this is the big data approach. I'd like to say that in this great time for science, we are also tackling an important medical issue. And as Dale Carnegie said, you can take a lemon and make lemonade of it. So this means that we should take this new paradigm on board to tackle this issue. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed.
I would like to announce the president of Codata, Barents Mons, please.
Thank you very much. I'm Barend Mons, a professor at Leiden University Medical Center, so welcome from the Netherlands. But I'm here as the president of Codata, and for those who don't know, I think everybody knows, Codata is the standing committee of that deals with data of the, among others, the International Science Council reporting to UNESCO. So we are really looking at the global level, and we have a decadal plan in development to address the data issues that concern the major sustainable development goals. And one of the things we concluded, of course, is that none of the sustainable development goals can be solved without interdisciplinary and international data exchange. So, in fact, all of them are influencing a system, and therefore we need international applied systems analysis. Now, the good news is there is an institute for that, so we actually have a very strong collaboration with them. And I'm also proud to announce, or to mention, that the two vice presidents that I have at the moment, one of them from China, Zhang Wei, and one of them is a very strong supporter also of IIASA, which is Leona Rybkina, who's my other vice president, and we work very well together. So I think that the importance of this meeting is that we believe very strongly that if we want to do what Alexei also said, to make optimal use of big data, we need to make the data AI, artificial intelligence, ready. And I'm the final author of the chair paper, which is findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable data. But now, especially the Americans have turned around that acronym into fully AI-ready data. There again. So I think if you really want to go cross-disciplinary and cross-regional and use enormous amounts of data to address the sustainable development goals, we need to have the systems approach all over the place. We need to make sure that the data are interoperable, reusable across regions and disciplines. It is a huge effort. And therefore, we strongly support something where I really hope also Russia will join soon, more strongly than it did so far, and that is what we call the Global Open Science Cloud. So we have the European Open Science Cloud, of course. We have similar initiatives in China, in Australia, and everywhere. But we need a global open science cloud, and together with Codata, the Chinese government has taken some initiative to kickstart meetings around that with €1 million to start with, and we are very much involved as Codata to get that. And I really believe this meeting could be extremely important for certain regions to join the initiative. So I wish you a very important and fruitful meeting, and I'll be coming back several times and also speak later on the meeting. Thank you very much.
Мы, к сожалению, немножко уже наш график нарушаем. Я с неким опозданием, но с большим удовольствием передаю
Unfortunately, we are a little bit behind the schedule. I'd like to give the floor to the rector of MGIMO, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Russia. So we'll start the science diplomacy session with your speech. Thank you very much. Mr. Torkanov, the floor is yours.
I shall speak English. Или я могу по-русски выступать?
Or shall I speak Russian? Anatoly, you can speak either language because we are being interpreted. Okay, thank you very much.
Colleagues, thank you very much for this excellent opportunity to moderate the high-level session, science diplomacy and system analysis. As we all noticed already that during the welcome opening remarks, we already started to discuss substantial issues of our conference. As a moderator, benefiting from my position, I'll say a few words about my own experience and the experience of my university in system analysis of international relations. You know, we have a very long history. We introduced international relations research using the systems analysis in 1976. That time established the Problem Research Center of System Analysis of International Relations. And in this decision, rector of the time, Lebedev, was supported by Germain Guishani, whom you know well. He was then the deputy chair of the State Committee for Science and Technology. Researchers on GMO from the beginning actively studied international experience and promoted international ties. In 1976, a research trip to the United States was organized. GMO researchers visited leading think tanks, including grand corporations and some leading universities. A year later, a similar visit to Japan took place. And from the beginning, working contacts were established with IIASA in Austria. The IIASA will celebrate its anniversary next year. Over time, our center became a real think tank, a factory of ideas. It showed its effectiveness not only as a center of theoretical research, but for a base for the study and teaching system analysis, but also installing practical. For example, forecast on the development of the situation in Iran after the 1979 revolution laid the basis for the proposal prepared for the country's top leadership. Today, MGIMO is proud of its scientific research ecosystem, the foundation of which is the legacy of our Center of System Analysis. It has been succeeded by the Multidisciplinary Institute of International Studies. Today, MGIMO is ranked number 8 in the world among university-affiliated think tanks by the University of Pennsylvania rating. An important area of MGIMO's work is the second track, scientific, public, and humanitarian diplomacy. I'll mention the Russian-French Trianon dialogue is devoted this year to environmental, climate, and health issues. The Russian-Austrian Sochi dialogue will hold a conference in July devoted to the problem of genetics. Humanitarian contacts also along the second track on complex issues of Russian-Polish history relations. And we together produced a convincing result in the form of a joint monograph, White Spots, Black Spots, translated into Polish, Russian, and English. And we did the same work with our Japanese friends and colleagues, and issued a very serious monograph on Russian-Japanese relations in the 20th century, Polish and Russian, and was translated and published in English in Poland. And just one more remark, just a few weeks ago, we established inside the university this special center of academic diplomacy. And the head of this center is a professor who is well known to, I think, well known to all of you, Professor Berkman, who served as the director of Science Diplomacy Center in Prague and Harvard University. So I'm a moderator, so I want to give the floor to our speakers. And the first speaker is a distinguished Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, Alexander Pankin. Alexander, are you here? Alexander. No, he is not with us.
I'm here. Hello, I'm with you. Now I can see you. Great. Alexander Pankin.
I'll say it was about him. He graduated from GIMO in 1985. Since October 2017, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, supervising issues of Eurasian integration and economic cooperation. And he spent several years in Geneva, working in the Russian mission to the United Nations office, and also a few years in New York, the deputy head of our mission to the United Nations, and also served as the director of the Department of International Organizations of our Foreign Office. Alexander, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Colleagues from IIASA, Albert van Jaarsveld. I'll speak Russian and I can switch to English anytime it suits you. Let me thank everyone. I'd like to thank the organizers. I'd like to say that the scientific dimension of intergovernmental contacts and other contacts is really important. And so what diplomats can do for science and what can science do for diplomats? Diplomacy is part of public diplomacy, and we understand that political and other factors play a role here, and there are some pathways here to prompt the politicians to understand some issues and to develop approaches to establishing relationships. So science is the only thing answers the question what is happening, why it is happening, and what we should do next, which is really important. So we understand that Russian diplomacy, Eurasian diplomacy really needs the support of science, research, well, the equal base research efforts. So we'll talk about domination and equality later on. Well, politicians and scientists, they are a specific group of people, and they should be independent in what they do, develop, research, since every time when we start negotiations about international cooperation and other things, we are based on scientific assessments. Sure, we use this scientific foundation for our negotiations. So what can science do for diplomacy and for the foreign affairs in the Eurasian area and globally? Well, science has always been in demand. We can see that communication technologies are developing, and we can see that different versions are coming of various approaches. Artificial intelligence is really an important thing here, and we are now revising the legal framework and the ethical framework of our activities. Well, all this promotes science, and all the discussions and actions are often based on science. And we really need some breakthroughs here and some progress. And at the same time, we understand that there are new and old problems, and we can see some inequality issues. We can see that this is happening within countries, and we can see that these gaps, the inequality, is a really slow thing to change. And we have other things like natural issues and environmental issues. And these things need to be addressed by international politics. We need interdisciplinary assessment of the situation, and we need to be able to have some technological breakthroughs in these fields. And diplomats should also understand the reference points used by their colleagues and counterparts to have a coordinated approach to the discussion. We can use corporate approaches, we can use industrial approaches. Here we can apply national approaches. We can see that the world is changing quickly, some new opportunities come and go, so we should be quick to respond. So we have seen some progress within the last, say, several hundred years. And we can see that this progress has brought benefits like convenience, speed, more opportunities. And this used to be a kind of natural progress. We know that we had different kinds of labor, production, and some people benefited and some other people lost. And now we can see more and more scare stories about science, for instance. So what people are doing is based on fear and not the need and wish to move forward, so that opportunities should arise for everyone, and not only those who are front runners. Well, science diplomacy is now having some new challenges. And one of my ideas is that we should understand that we need science to bear the fruit which should become available, but not for fierce competition and not for squeezing out other industries. So how can we do it? That's an open question. Maybe systems analysis can help here. So we had the ancient Chinese approach, like let the 100 think tanks flourish. Okay, that's fine. And we see that this can happen in many places. And we should this way find some common denominator. And we understand that opinions differ, and science diplomacy is not about reaching agreement on everything. So, but we should have some coordination, some understanding of the mainstream, and we should understand the benefits and the challenges new science brings. Today, we can see that people are building roadmaps, and these roadmaps pretend to be scientifically based. But we know that this is not always the fact. And there are many. So if you have many opinions supporting something, it doesn't mean that this is the only right option to follow, because sources and opinions differ. Well, I have a lot of respect for the IIASA, which is a really important point for international cooperation. And now we can see that internationalization of science is getting weaker. We cannot see the great mega projects designed for breakthroughs. So we have some contacts at the level of corporations, but they are not international projects. As we have mentioned, one country, even the advanced and the strong ones, well, including Russia, they cannot address these challenges on their own. This means that we should think about the new areas and we really need to look for ways where scientists can offer some new things for diplomacy. So we know that CERN is going on. So this is the legacy of the previous generation's efforts. Well, providing technological solutions, we should understand that science should support our progress, and all this should be underpinned by ethical, legal, and other research. So we can say, okay, we can develop science without any borders, but we have some ethical borders, like we are humans, we don't want clones, and so on and so forth. So we should understand where we are going together and how we can help the humanity. Well, Eurasia, for instance, this is the most populated area on Earth. Many billion people live here, and all of them want to live in comfort, and they want to enjoy the progress. And we don't think that technologies should equalize all the different cultures we enjoy. We don't think that we should be all going in one direction. So it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. So we understand that science should help diplomacy, and diplomacy should help science. And all the things we do in diplomacy, they should be supported by science and by high quality data. So diplomacy is there to prevent conflicts, to mitigate conflicts, and to respond to conflicts. And the free development of science and technology in any field can sometimes bring conflicts. So we don't want the conflicts to be technologically advanced. So that's what is happening now. So I understand that the military are using science, but we understand that now we have technological revolutions, and we don't want all of this to be used in such a way that it's not us, say, humans or diplomats determining the future, but rather the artificial intelligence, which can be limited. Well, I'm deputy minister, but now I'm putting on the citizen's head, and you know, the program is as good, or the software piece is as good as the designer of this software. So we can see that even small pieces of this AI can be really defect and not very good. So as for the big data, this is really important. So we need to properly analyze various events and happenings and human profiles. And we have here consulate support things like passports, IDs, national IDs, and border crossings and other things. So all of this can be a good part of relationships between the political agencies, and we see some other things here. So hopefully I have given you a realistic assessment of the situation we have today in terms of the international agenda. So can we stop the nuclear war, for instance? So 30 years ago, scientists said that it shouldn't be started because this will be, the beginning of the end. But now, some scientists, well, not propaganda people, but now, well, scientists who would say that this shouldn't be done. So these scientists are not there. So these voices are not heard, and that's why we can see some new approaches to some limited or low-scale nuclear war and so on and so forth. So I believe that the old good times, well, though they were the times of the Cold War, of the threat of elimination, well, these times, well, are in a way needed, I mean, in terms of science. So in terms of science, not for propaganda. So this approach is really important. So I wish all the sections a lot of success, and I hope they're going to be more applied, and hopefully they will connect science to reality, because quite often they're not connected. So we need to bring them together. We should remember that science is there for people, for the humanity, and I hope that all the discussions with the support of scientists are going to be productive, and that will let us find some common denominator. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alexander. You raised some very important questions, and I'm sure that some of them would be the core of our further discussions. And now I have the pleasure and honor to give the floor to Levin, who is well known as the former director of the Institute of Applied System Analysis, who spent much time with the RAND Corporation as one of the vice presidents of RAND, and who is well known as a distinguished expert. So, Roger, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon to you in Moscow and to virtual participants across the world. I'm going to tell you about IIASA as a case study in science diplomacy. IIASA was the child of science and diplomacy. It contains the heritage of both its parents, and much of what it does involves or is science diplomacy. To help me, I'm going to share some. It says here that post-disabled participant screen sharing. However, my presentation depends on it. Can you enable me to screen share? I have a problem. The slides will not show. So,
okay, right.
We're in business. I'm going to talk, as I said, about science diplomacy and the creation of IIASA. And I'm going to tell you a story in 5 parts. First, I want to answer the question, where did IIASA come from? What was its conception? Second, I'm going to talk about how it was created. What was the process that led to its existence? Third, I'm going to describe its existence at birth. Then I'm going to tell you about development. And finally, the conclusion of what was accomplished. And I'm going to try to do this in 10 or so minutes. So pay attention. First, I want to talk about the conception. IIASA is a child of the Cold War. And in 1967, the Cold War had heated up between the US and its Western allies, the Soviet Union and its Eastern allies, with a series of events, the US bombing North Vietnam, the Soviet Union entering Czechoslovakia, Israel and Egypt engaged in war. It was a tense time in the Cold War, but there was an opportunity presented by a UN meeting on the Israeli-Egypt conflict, which brought the Prime Minister of the Soviet Union, Alexei Kosygin, to the US, where he was able to accept the invitation of the President of the United States, Lyndon Johnson, for a one-on-one, that is, a personal meeting in a small town just about. Well, there wasn't a lot of outcome from that meeting in big diplomacy. In interpersonal and international relations, in that the two men felt that they had a common need and desire to see relations ease. And that became known as the spirit of Glasgow. Lyndon Johnson had been thinking for the previous years about ways to start up and bridge build between the West and the East. And within his staff in the White House, an idea had blossomed that there might be a possibility of building bridges by establishing an institution jointly manned, jointly staffed, I should say, on common problems of the industrialized nations. In 1967, he sent his former National Security Advisor, George Bundy, by that time president of the Ford Foundation, to Moscow to see if there was interest. And that interest existed and was took the form of a meeting with German Giviciani, who at that time was the deputy minister of the State Committee on Science and Technology, and incidentally, Alexei Kosygin's son-in-law, and also Alexei Giviciani's father. Giviciani was the right man, the right person in the right place at the right time. He had a strong interest in bringing Western management practices into the Soviet system. He had many contacts in the West because he was engaged in the interaction with Western industry, spoke fluent English, and had many of the management books, classics, translated into Russian as part of his interest in establishing. So there was a common interest between the US and the Soviet Union expressed in the persons of President Johnson and Alexei Kosygin and Giviciani. And this led to a series of negotiations, which I'll call the creation. Over the course of 5 years, senior scientists negotiated. Representing the West was the president of the National Academy of Sciences, Philip Handler. Representing the East was German Giviciani. And each of them, of course, had colleagues participating with them. Prominent scientists from Great Britain was Sally Zuckerman, a noted biologist. And similarly, Vishyani had people he wanted to have associated with him from the eastern states. This was because of one of the critical issues that held up the negotiation for a while. It's the third on the list. On the left side of this slide, you'll see what I've called the diplomatic agenda. These 7 issues were the topics that had to be resolved in the course of that 5-year series of meetings between scientists acting as diplomats on each side of the Iron Curtain, meeting on several times a year over the course of that time. The issue was that the West did not recognize East Germany and would not participate in diplomatic meetings with East Germany. On the other hand, Vishyani relied on East Germany and wanted to make sure that it could participate in meetings. That issue had to be resolved, and the resolution was the topic right above the one I'm discussing, status. It was unclear whether IIASA should be or what became IIASA should be intergovernmental, meaning the subject of treaties, or international, perhaps a sub-part of the UN agencies, or non-governmental. And the decision on that was non-governmental. Having decided on non-governmental, the issue of East Germany went away, and the consultation and discovery could proceed. The 7 issues on the left side of this slide, the resolution of each of them is shown on the right side of this slide. The location was initially of great interest to the Western participants was London, or the French offered Fontainebleau. But in the end, the very generous and very appropriate offer by the Austrians of Schloss Laxenburg, which had suffered extensively during the war and in its aftermath, they offered that to the Institute and promised to renovate it, exactly meet the needs of the Institute, and to rent it to the Institute at the rate of 1 shilling a year. That was an offer that could not be refused and turned out, as we all know, to have been a superb decision. So we have a location in Schloss Luxembourg, a quick decision that English would be the only language and would not have interpretation or translation as part of its responsibilities. Excuse me. Another topic was what would be the focus of the Institute? Management or science? Would it be something like a business, an industrial activity very much focused on practice? Would it be very theoretical and focused on science in its purest form? Well, the answer was, right at hand, there was something called systems analysis that had developed primarily in the US, but which dealt with both the issues of public policy and industrial practice in a scientific manner, but approached from an applied sense. Therefore, with Vishyani's encouragement, the Institute adopted systems analysis with the addition of the phrase applied. So applied systems analysis is a discipline that had not existed in that, at least had not been described that way before, and neither did international applied systems analysis exist. So that both gave IIASA a charter which is rather broad and which enabled the Institute to develop what it wanted applied systems analysis to be, what it thought applied systems analysis to be, which it has done. I'll talk about the resolution of the other issues on the next slide when we talk about and discuss IIASA's birth, which occurred in October 1972. the negotiation had led to decision that there would be a council, which was the governing body, and the member organizations, the scientific bodies that would be representing the nations in the institute would have one member each on the council. The council would be chaired by someone from the Soviet Union, and academician Eurasian was given the choice to be the first chairman. Give me a second while I take a brief pause to drink it. Okay, and then the actual operational day-to-day management of the Institute would be a director from the United States. The first director was Professor Howard Rafa from the Harvard Business School. Howard was a professor of decision science and had participated in negotiations during the course of that 5-year period. After he had to return to Harvard in 1974, I was appointed the director. I had come from the RAND Corporation, where I was head of the Department of System Sciences and active in the adoption of system analysis to non-military problems. There were 12 national member organizations initially, 5 from the East, 7 from the West. 3 were represented by academies of science. The others formed special committees to carry out the representation. And of course, it was located, as I said, outside of Vienna. Here is the cast of characters that I just mentioned to give you a little sense of what it looked like 45 years ago. Now, the major set of issues that existed were diplomatic and managerial. IIASA being a different kind of institution, every internal management and organizational decision also had an international component. Let me start with the issue of what projects should be on the agenda. Howard Rafa thought when he began that it should be 1 or 2 projects and that they should be things that every member was interested in. After soliciting their opinions, he found that there was no project that was of interest to all of the members. He fell back on what has been the policy from then on, that the agenda of the Institute would be a portfolio, a balanced set of projects in which every member organization can find at least a few of interest. The second problem was, what is an international problem? As I saw it, when I took over the directorship, there were 2 kinds of international problems. Global problems like energy supply and nowadays climate, which can only be resolved by more than one nation acting together. And there are universal problems, which every nation has: healthcare, water quality, technology management. You can resolve it individually, but they are universal, and there may be some common lessons that can be learned or practices developed that all can share. So the research program contained both global and universal problems. The third problem that arose was the research staff. Which disciplines, from which countries, with what experience, and for how long? The answer was balanced research teams. most critical balance was interdisciplinary. As most of you know by now, interdisciplinary is a difficult discipline to carry out. Academics tend to be very sharply disciplinary, but we needed a mix of disciplines to deal with practical problems. Secondly, they had to be scientists with an applied cast of mind. And of course, they had to be international. And one of the issues at IIASA at that time was to balance the teams between East and West. So you can imagine the challenge of building a research team that is balanced East-West, that has a proper mix of interdisciplinary scientists. Somehow it was managed, and there's a longer story there, but I'll cut the length of time I'm speaking. We had to also develop international applied systems analysis. Among the things we produced was a text, a handbook of applied systems analysis, 3 volumes. It exists, and here is an example of one of the volumes. We had established the Young Scientist Summer Program, which brought young scientists in their graduate years from all around the world for a 3-month stay during the summer. That program now has about 1,500 alumni working in countries all over the world and carrying with them the lessons of IIASA. Finally, we had an issue of communications, how to reach out to scientists and policymakers both. And we developed a series of activities, which I'll save for a comment. Finally, we established a matrix organization, which drew both on the program structure and the discipline structure. And last, but very, very important, was how do you create a bridge-building organization that functions as a unified organization with a group of people who had never met each other before and were probably leaving in a short time. We spent a lot of time building the IIASA family through various shared celebrations, trips. We helped families to find housing, to get schooling for their children, which was very important at that time in Austria. So finally, I'm sorry I've had to bear this speech problem for the moment, but I hope I'm making the points that are extremely important about IIASA, and you see them before you on the screen. There were 4 accomplishments. It is a unique international scientific research organization. International teams, East-West, full-time, interdisciplinary, working with collaborators worldwide on significant public policy issues. It added 5 new members in the course of the following 6 years. It increased the dues at the maximum level of the charter. There were a couple of major global studies completed on energy and on food and agriculture, a major conference on the carbon dioxide and climate issue in 1977. Many universal topics that you see listed there, and we developed the International Applied Systems Analysis as an application-oriented discipline. So that sums up the first decade of IIASA, how it was created, what it did, and what it accomplished. Thank you very much for your patience, and I'm happy to answer further questions. Thank you.
Professor Levin, thank you very, very much for your very interesting historical observation of the activities of the Institute. Very useful and interesting for all of us. the same time, I should remind you, dear friends, that we're out of schedule already. Because of some unexpected circumstances, I have to leave our session, and that's why I asked Professor Panchenko all the rest. So excuse me and thank you very much. Nowhere. Thank you.
We have only less than 15 minutes for 3 presentations. What I would like to discuss with you, what your opinion, how we will to continue our work. Only 5 minutes for each presentation.
Maybe we can use some discussion time to extend a little bit the presentation.
Давай.
Will be fine.
Окей. Ну, потому что неудобно, вот можно у Виктора Брюкмана, конечно, попросить 5-7 минут.
Vladislav, can
Да, я слушаю, да.
Sure, you're welcome.
А веду, я с вами, да. Кто меня спросил?
Vladislav, if I may, can I also...
А кто говорит? У меня ничего на экране нет, я не знаю.
Okay, and who is that speaking? I cannot
Sorry, it's Albert van Jaarsveld speaking. Vladislav, I just came to my attention that Sir Peter Gluckman is of course in New Zealand. This is beyond midnight for him already. I was wondering whether we could ask him to go first of the remaining speakers in this session, if that's possible.
Okay. Хорошая идея, мне кажется, да?
Okay, that's a good idea.
Okay, please.
Thank you very much. I'm Peter Gluckman. I'm President-elect of the International Science Council. I'm President of the International Network of Government Science Advice. And within that network, we operate the Foreign Ministry Science and Technology Advisory Network, which is a network of about 40 countries who work together in a track 2 science diplomacy relationship. I think it's really important to think about science diplomacy in relationship to a new way of thinking about it. And this came actually from a meeting that we had at IIASA about 5 years ago. Namely, science diplomacy is using science to achieve diplomatic goals. All diplomatic goals ultimately are in the interests of the country's own ambitions. But within that, there are actions which are directly for the national interest of a country. There are actions which are for bilateral or regional interest, such as environmental management together. And then there's actions in the interest of the global commons. And it's that I want to talk about now, namely science diplomacy to deal with the challenges of the global interests, because I think that is the challenge of the 21st century, as we're seeing playing out in the pandemic now. If you think about the global challenges, there are obviously common issues that we all confront, and which if countries pursue a national as opposed to a global approach, it will ultimately work against their own self-interest. And so I think the challenge in much of science diplomacy is persuading countries that it's in their national interest, self-interest, to work together with other countries for the global good. COVID demonstrates this dramatically. Clearly, global cooperation on COVID is going to terminate the pandemic far quicker and more effectively than nationalistic, individualistic actions. Similarly, climate change is very much the same. If we don't all work together to a common goal of reducing emissions, we will all suffer the consequences of a failure to work collaboratively. Similarly, there are other aspects of science where we need to work together through science diplomacy for global benefit. An example of that would be the geostrategic consequences of new technologies, such as autonomous warfare, such as issues around the internet and digital milieu, and potentially around some very advanced life sciences technologies. We clearly face a common interest in reducing the impacts of misinformation when they undermine trust in science. Beyond that, the world is largely full of ungoverned spaces, and science actually works very much to coordinate effective governance of ungoverned spaces. And you can see that in terms of the Antarctic Treaty, again, another outcome of the Cold War period, a treaty involving the major countries in using Antarctic for scientific purposes. We see it in much of the other ungoverned spaces, include the oceans, the seabed, space itself, and the internet. And all of those are areas where science actually plays a dominant role in actually integrating and maintaining some sense of governance. And then there are going to be a whole raft of new technologies that may avoid jurisdictional control or require collective approaches. And if we think hypothetically ahead, if unfortunately we do need a geoengineering approach to deal with climate change, how would we reach agreement on what to do? What would we do? What about the issues around the release of synthetic bacteria or some advanced life science technologies? Do we need to think about that as an issue that science diplomats must create? And so, given the time is late, I just want to make a few brief comments. We have to be honest and say the multilateral system is in a weak state. It's performed poorly in the COVID pandemic. The pandemic, it's outstanding to me that neither the United Nations Security Council nor the General Assembly has chosen to meet on what is the biggest existential crisis since the Second World War. The WHO itself has issues, as we know. And what we need to recognize is that many of these issues emerge because countries fail to understand that it's in their common interest to work together using science and diplomacy. And for that reason, I think it's really important that meetings such as this that are being held jointly between IIASA and their Russian colleagues are critical. Science is a way of bridging cultures. We saw and tensions. We saw that in the Cold War when it led to the formation of IIASA itself. The challenge is, can we continue to use those mechanisms? Can we strengthen them, both using formal processes through foreign ministries and track two processes such as through the International Science Council and through organizations such as IIASA to make faster progress on these global challenges. If we don't, we'll all pay a price. So in summary, what I really want to say is science diplomacy is critical, but science diplomacy needs to be seen as a global issue. We need to all work together on these major existential crises. I congratulate IIASA in holding this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. And хорошо, давайте. Hello, Albert.
Thank you. Yes, Vladislav. Do you want me to go?
Okay, I see.
Yes.
Please.
Do you want me to go ahead? Thank you. All right. I will do that.
Okay.
I will share quickly my screen, if that's okay with everybody. I'll try and get through this as quickly as I can time-wise. I understand we're under pressure. So thank you very much for this opportunity to talk to you about science diplomacy and systems analysis. I'm falling back on the definition of science diplomacy as outlined by the Royal Society and the IIASA many years ago now already. But I think the important point I'm trying to make here is that irrespective of which perspective of science diplomacy you're taking a look at, IIASA is involved in all three of these in one way or the other. And we will continue hopefully in the future to do so. IIASA, of course, brings together many member countries, as you can see on the right-hand side, a growing portfolio of member countries over time that is strongly moving away from the classical East-West divide into a more global fraternity of members that are trying to tackle the global and shared problems as outlined by Roger so clearly across the globe in the best interest of humanity. On this basis, we keep engaging with many of our ambassadors that visit IIASA regularly and engage with us about existing opportunities, new opportunities, and new avenues to explore multilateral cooperation as far as tackling these global issues collectively. We use science diplomacy as a bridge builder at IIASA. We've tackled issues like the opportunities of economic integration within a wider European and Eurasian space as an ongoing project at IIASA. And even at the times of the deepest crisis between the EU and Russia, IIASA offered a neutral and depoliticized platform for discussions on international trade and strengthening international engagements across the broader Eurasian region. IIASA engages with organizations like the OECD to provide systems thinking approaches and methods for international policy making to ensure that we don't just engage with our members directly, but we also engage with other international organizations in terms of their approaches and strengthening the way we think about new economic systems in this particular instance. We've also made significant contributions in terms of science diplomacy towards climate change challenges that we face. IIASA was a key contributor to the eventual Paris Climate Agreement to limit increases to 1.5 degrees, where 10% of the lead authors were from IIASA in that particular instance. And IIASA has also contributed to the Warsaw International Mechanism for Loss and Damage, looking at mechanisms to deal with novel disaster and climate risk insurance instruments, particularly for developing and vulnerable nations, as far as climate change impacts are concerned. IIASA, of course, has played a role historically in assisting major environmental issues that face the European environment. Transboundary air pollution issues, particularly sulfur dioxide emissions, were a major problem in the 1970s that all of you remember, and 3 critical policy interventions that were developed over time and made available and have significantly affected and changed the trajectory of SO2 emissions across the European landscape for over a period of decades up to the present stage, which is, of course, resolved the acid rain problem that Europe was facing at that particular time. We also tackle new interesting projects on international cooperation. This is one that focuses on the nexus between food, water, and energy issues in a transboundary river basin in an area where there's interest from China, India, and Pakistan. And working in the Indus Basin was a very interesting exercise for us, but it helped us understand quite clearly the policy implications of working in a transboundary landscape in the mutual interest of all participants. IIASA was key in organizing a global meeting of science advisors in ministries of foreign affairs, the FM STAN meeting. It was held in 2019, and we will continue to engage with this very interesting group of science advisors to assist the relationships between diplomacy or the diplomats and the scientific community. IIASA was also instrumental in creating the Bridges Network. It's a big research infrastructures for diplomacy and global engagement. These big research infrastructures that we collectively create as nation states. There was reference by the Deputy Minister earlier to CERN. These are just some of the others that are on the table at the moment. We feel that these create a significant opportunity for science diplomatic efforts and collective multilateralism as far as big infrastructure is concerned. But as the Deputy Minister indicated, we need similar kind of efforts and similar kind of approaches to address the big global challenges that we face. It shouldn't just be revolve around a big infrastructure, but it should be pervasive in terms of cooperation to ensure that we can tackle the big global challenges that we face as humanity. Lastly, I'd like to just finish off to remind you that science diplomacy is a key component of the new IIASA strategy, which we started rolling out at the beginning of this year. We are trying to use science to strengthen bilateral and multilateral relationships, particularly to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And we see that see this as a strategic objective in the new strategy, and make sure that we can contribute to the resolution of many of our emerging global challenges through collaborative research work in the first instance, but then also through multilateral diplomatic efforts in the long run. So with that, I would like to finish. Thank you very much. Appreciate your attention, and we look forward to the further deliberations.
Minutes, thank you. It's a very important for our schedule. Thank you. And thank you very much. Дорогие коллеги, друзья, вот Алексей Джерманович Гвишани предложил свое сообщение.
Said that his speech should be moved to Wednesday, where he will moderate. So this will happen tomorrow. Yeah. Tomorrow at 1 p.m. Comprehensive approaches to the Arctic and boreal issues. And the speech, which was planned for today, is thus postponed. And he, as the moderator, will be able to mention all these things. So we will move this speech until later. On behalf of the organizers, I'd like to apologize to the moderator of the next poster session, Victor Gluckman. Sorry for this. And with these apologies, I'm giving him the floor. So you're welcome. And I believe that you can take 10 or 15 minutes from the coffee break for your session. Thank you very much for your attention. I'd like to thank all the participants in this session. Mr. Torkunov started chairing it. So I'd like to thank all the speakers, all the panelists, and the audience, both live and virtual. Thank you very much.
At the Austrian side, the Austrian IIASA committee. Its chair, Professor Christian Köberl, introduced the Austrian IIASA perspective earlier in the opening session. I do have the pleasure and honor to moderate the poster blitz sessions, which are scheduled in between the scientific and discussion sessions at each day of this conference. Let me start with some technical aspects at first. Poster sessions are divided into 2 blocks each. The first block gives a brief introduction on each poster presentation to the entire audience. Each presenter has no more than 2 minutes to introduce the topic, and I will carefully observe the timing. After this block, we will open a separate Zoom meeting during the coffee break where you can get in touch with poster presenters individually for in-depth discussions and for discussing questions in a rather informal atmosphere. In addition, I would like to point out that all posters will be available for further discussion and interaction at the IIASA Connect platform, and is even beyond this conference. So you see, we have tried our very best to provide at least a flavor of an inspiring atmosphere that is usually created during physical poster discussions. We will make sure that nobody misses the time to join the subsequent sessions. Having said this, let us straight jump into the poster presentations, and I will like to introduce the first speaker. Scheduled in the program is a poster from Anna Chernikova, and I have to apologize, but she's for some reason not available at this point. So we will proceed with the second poster, and the speaker is Peter Lohmander. He is expert in forest economics and owner and president of Optimal Solutions, a Swedish company. He will now briefly talk about his topic, adaptive mobile firefighting resources, stochastic dynamic optimization of international collaboration. Peter, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, dear colleagues. This is a pleasure for me to be here. I was a YSSP in IIASA in 1985. And in particular, I remember Professor Kurczansky, who was chair of Systems and Decision Sciences at the time. I will talk to you about adaptive mobile firefighting resources, stochastic dynamic optimization of international cooperation. Problem: forest fires create large economical and environmental problems in many countries. And questions are the following: what are the stochastic properties of fires in different countries? And is international cooperation rational? Solution: adaptive optimization can optimize international cooperation, and general methods and principles have been derived. Please switch to the next page. I assume, yeah. Okay, here, since we just have 2 minutes totally, I will just jump into the results. The results are of different types. First, you have statistical properties of fires in different countries. And here, for instance, you find correlations of burned areas in different countries during 9 years, from 2010 until 2018. And you see here that you have different parts in this diagram: a yellow, a purple, and a blue, or turquoise. And you see that the correlations between some of these countries are very high, and between some of them are very low. And this is very important because, as you see in the bottom part of the page to the left, we have the important problem is to optimize adaptive international firefighting coordination. And this can be done through stochastic dynamic programming, where you move internationally mobile units over the boundaries and help the countries that need these resources at the time. And in this situation, the negative correlations between some countries are very important because it's then frequently rational to move, for instance, waterbombing airplanes from one nation to another. To the right, we see that we can use optimal solutions and we can derive them through analytical and numerical methods, and we can use different approaches. Since my time is very limited, we have to jump to the next page.
Peter, time is up.
Okay, thank you.
Conclude. Thank you. Thank you very much, Peter. We have to move on to the next slide, unfortunately, by Rima Mothani from the Indian Institute of Science in Bangalore. And the topic will be sustainability assessment of biofuel supply chain in the transport sector using a circular economy framework. Rima, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Rima Mohanty. I'm from Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. My topic is sustainability assessment of biofuel supply chain in transport sector using circular economy framework. Am I audible?
Yes.
Thank you. So coming to the first slide, I'll share my screen now.
Your slide is already visible.
Okay, thank you. So can I change my slide? I'm not able to change my slide, the slide one. Share screen I'm doing, but yeah, thank you. So can you see my slide now?
Yes.
So the first slide talks about the research background. Well, there is a continuous worry about the depletion of fossil fuel, emissions of carcinogenic gases. For that reason, there is a need of a clean and renewable energy. Therefore, in Indian Institute of Science, we profoundly work on a cleaner supply of energy. We have taken biofuel as a cleaner resource. For that, we have taken the circular economy framework. Well, the circular economy framework does wonder that the linear economy framework doesn't do. It actually connects the subsystems between the entire system, and it shows that there is an interdependency between all the blocks. Now coming to the research work. In the research work part, we have done the sustainability assessment under this framework. There are two indicators we have focused on. One is economic, second one is environmental. In the economic part, we have actually gone for profit maximization by these data we have collected of the proposed ethanol biofuel plant that is situated in Karnataka, a state in India. In the state of Karnataka, we are actually collecting the data so that we can propose a 2G ethanol biofuel plant. The first indicator shows that we are actually going for very much uncertainties and randomness. So for that reason, we have taken the use of a very heuristic approach, a heuristic optimization technique, a modern optimization technique that is known as particle storm optimization technique. And it shows a good result that eventually with the increase of years, the profit increases. On the other hand, for the environment indicator, we have gone for the life cycle assessment technique, as well as I'm working on the PSO algorithm too. And in this part, we are seeing that there is a huge increase in the amount of nitrogen oxides. The probable reason can be the huge use of the pesticides and chemical fertilizers. So one of the solutions for it can be abolishment of the pesticides and use of green manure. Thank you.
Thank you, Rima. Very topical indeed. I would like to introduce the next speaker, the next poster from Yanai Sagin. She is affiliated with the Association of the Conservation of Biodiversity of Kazakhstan. And the title of this poster is Sustainability of the Urban and Rural Regions Development in Central Asia. Yanai, the floor is yours.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for this opportunity. So as you may see, the title of my presentation is related to sustainability of the urban and rural regions in Central Asia. So on the top of my image, you may see Aral Sea area. And currently we work on these issues with support from the World Bank. So please check this first web link. It calls Disruptive Aral. So you may get a lot of information what we're trying to work on and what kind of innovative technologies could be used on the Aral Sea basin. And one of the opportunities are related to the groundwater use, because we have about 31 billion cubic meters, and it will be reasonable to use efficiently these groundwater resources. And connected issue is on the bottom images from the Nur-Sultan city, which is in development on the north part of Kazakhstan. So you may see a similar situation that expansion of the cities actually destruct the environment. As you may see, wetlands and lakes are shrinking also. So you may see the similarities that people disturb the environment and we destruct nature and eliminate some wetlands and lakes. So it will be rational to work on this issue and develop some tools, methodologies, what could be developed to keep the good balance of rural and urban areas development. So you may check another link, is from Germany. We are working currently on this project with support from the German government. The project calls Client 2. Could you move on the next image, please? On the second one. So you may see this information about our German project, which calls Teresa, Urban Water Management, German Expertise for Kazakh Cities. So you may see that development of the cities destruct much natural environment, and we actually destruct natural filtration, that water doesn't filtrate well underground, and mostly we have runoff. So how we can find the right balance and to have a proper filtration of the water and to have to reuse this groundwater in the future. So our research project is related to this issue. So we hope to develop some tools, modeling tools, and these tools could be applied for RLC region. So working on the Nazarbayev University campus on the north part of Kazakhstan, we will develop a proper tools to monitor and to see surface water movement, underground water movement, and potentially it could be applied for the RLC region. So I saw on your website of IIASA that you are very strong in modeling and you have a lot of excellent models. So I invite you to cooperate with us and you may share your expertise in modeling, and we are looking for the partners from Austria, and Vienna is very strong in this sustainable development, keeping this good balance of urban-rural development. So you're welcome to join my presentation and we'll discuss more. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to all poster presenters of today's Blitz poster session. I think that shows really in a nutshell and very compressed, I'm very well aware of this, the diversity and the huge amount of different topics to be touched at IIASA's research and together with international collaboration. So now it's time for the audience, for the general audience, to switch over to individual discussions with poster presenters of today by connecting to a separate meeting. And the link for this is available at the IIASA website, but please be aware that you might need to refresh the website in order to see this link. And the colleagues from IIASA will also post the link for all of the panelists here in this chat at the current meeting. We have a Best Poster Award. I would like to point this out as well, which is very attractive as it comes with a full travel support for the next regional events. So do not forget to vote for this, for your own favorite poster. You can do this today or after you were able to listen to all the posters from all 3 days. So with this, I would like to thank you very much. Thank you for all the presenters of today. And now let's join me to and join us to talk to our today's poster presenters in the separate meeting. The link is already on the website and in the chat function. Thank you and enjoy the further conference.
Okay. The use of systems analysis. The moderator for the session will be Albert van Jaarsveld, the CEO and Director General of IIASA Austria. Albert, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm just going to quickly share screen if that's okay with everybody, so we can move ahead. Thank you very much, and thank you for this opportunity to talk to you about systems analysis. We at IIASA, of course, have been growing and developing our expertise in the area of systems analysis for many years. But for us, the key component of our work is not just the systems analysis, but the application to real-world problems and issues. And when we think about where do we stand as a humanity at this stage of the game, this is just a summary of some of the chief issues and big problems that face us. 71% of adults around the world own less than $10,000 in wealth at the moment. From a health perspective, life expectancy has doubled in a century, which is good, but we've had increasing inequalities in terms of life expectancy. 1 billion people around the world are considered obese, while less go hungry. About 100 million people in 2018 suffered from acute hunger across the world. And many of these inequalities that have been mentioned now so far have been amplified by the COVID pandemic, and the health consequences are still playing out around the world as we speak. From an environmental perspective, 9 out of 10 people breathe air with higher levels of pollutants. 1 in 9 people use water that are unsafe. 2.3 billion people lack access to a toilet. From a happiness perspective, more people die by suicide than by war or violence around the globe. And happiness inequality is on the rise. Everybody in the world has a mobile phone, at least numerically, but 1 billion people have no access to electricity. 3 billion people suffer from land degradation, desertification, and have missed out on the great acceleration over the last number of decades. So this is where we stand as a humanity across the globe and some of the challenges we face. We know that we will live in a complex world, and many of these issues are not easy to solve. I think collectively there was a huge step taken forward when Agenda 2030 was agreed to by the United Nations that set a target for us in terms of the Sustainable Development Goals that we want to deliver on collectively. I think it's a giant step forward and a collective agenda for the whole of humankind to pursue collectively. But that has to be done and dealt with in the context and against the backdrop of this complexity that we face in terms of dealing with these matters. So from a IIASA perspective, we feel that systems analysis offers a really sound and high impact route for dealing with some of these complexity problems that we face around the world. And when we think about systems analysis, there are 5 critical components, as by the paper from Dickman and colleagues that you see listed at the bottom end, of systems analysis that are pertinent to dealing with these complex problems. The first of those is externalities. And externalities are created when we draw system boundaries too narrowly. And from an economic perspective, when we draw it so narrowly that we leave out the environmental and the social components out of the analysis, then we artificially create externalities. It's important that we draw system boundaries widely enough so that we can get a holistic accounting of the impacts that are likely to be precipitated of particular policy decisions. There's an opportunity cost associated where potential assets are sometimes viewed as costs, such as education and waste products, for argument's sake, in the context of industries, which could be utilized to deliver alternative solutions if they were inside the system boundaries. The second important component of systems thinking is feedbacks. Feedback loops, positive and negative. We know that there's a feedback loop between population, education, and wealth. In the long run, that determines the demography of a particular population, and I'll get back to that in a minute again with a little bit more discussion around that issue. Third critical component is trade-offs and synergies that are frequently not well reflected in analyses that are silo and narrowly defined. Critical components are left outside the system boundaries when we think about the analysis, and that as a consequence, the trade-offs and the synergies are poorly quantified. As an example, when we think about forget about the biodiversity consequences of an extensive biofuel production process, we forget that there are trade-offs as far as land use and biodiversity conservation are concerned. The fourth critical component is emergent phenomena. And this is particularly important in a species such as us, a human, a highly sociable species, where there are new, novel emergences that frequently catch us by surprise. We get new social movements that emerge, such as the Youth for Climate initiatives that happened quite recently. We get confronted with system tipping points that we find surprising, like lake eutrophication that happens at a particular level of pollution. And these tipping points or emergent phenomena are a critical component of systems thinking. And therefore, we shouldn't be surprised by them. We should anticipate them and expect them when we're thinking about systems. The fifth critical component is the idea of stakeholders and how we deal with stakeholders as far as systems thinking is concerned. Important is the inclusive framing of solutions. If the community and society is part of the framing of the problem, the carrying out of the research and finding a solution, the idea of policy acceptance is heightened and increased. And this lies at the heart of the transdisciplinarity approach that's frequently been talked about. And we at IIASA also use very fruitfully a number of gaming approaches to make sure that we are as inclusive as we can possibly be in terms of coming to these solutions. I'm now going to just give you a few examples of those kinds of critical aspects of systems thinking and how IIASA work has impacted on this space. This slide summarizes the global cost of dealing with particular problems. Energy security on the left-hand side, it'll cost you less than 0.2% of the global GDP to deal with that by itself. Air pollution itself, just under 0.6% of the global GDP, and climate change by itself, just more than 0.8% of the global GDP. So if you add all of these on top of each other, you'll see that you can provide a much more cost-effective solution if you had an integrated solution for all three of these problems. And you can save about 40% of the total cost by thinking in terms of a holistic system rather than the individual components at the end of the day. So holistic accounting is really important of impact because it means it results in significant savings, a bit more efficiency. The population issue, the relationship between population and education and wealth, and that cycle. We understand that there's a virtuous cycle that's possible in that space. But starting a conversation about population control is unlikely to find significant support from the community. If your solution is to provide a basic income grant to everybody and give everybody wealth, the economists are likely to balk at that. But if you start the conversation at education, you will find much more fertile ground, and the chances are you can kickstart that virtuous cycle much more efficiently and effectively by looking at education as a driver rather than the artificial wealth creation, or alternatively trying to drive down population fertility rates. The key issue here is that there is a relationship between education and development and the trajectories that you choose as a country or as a region are going to be determined by the levels of education. And it's a much easier way to start the virtuous cycle conversation. In terms of synergies, this is just a reminder that when we think about energy, we tend to think about the ways that energy is supplied and whether we can change from coal-based technologies or gas-based technologies to renewable energies, and how long is it going to take us, and what is feasible and doable. But on the other hand, I think this study just illustrates very clearly that it's as important to look at the demand side of energy. By reducing the demand, we can make a significant difference in terms of the speed and the rapidity with which we can achieve the 1.5 degree target that we set ourselves in the Paris Agreement. So making sure that we exploit the synergies between supply side management of energy and demand side management, we can come to a much better and much quicker solution in that space. As far as trade-offs are concerned, this just illustrates to you that the more ambitious we are in terms of dealing with some of the perceived planetary boundaries that we face as humanity, there will be consequences for the way that we manage other sectors as well. This just illustrates that the more ambitious we deal with planetary boundaries, there's going to be a concomitant impact in terms of food price. So food prices will increase the more severely you manage the environment at the same time. So there is a relationship between the two, and we have to be cognizant of these trade-offs and anticipate them and deal with them in our thinking. The issue of emergence, and I'm using the COVID tragedy that we're dealing with at the moment as an example here. But COVID has demonstrated a few things to us, that societies can respond in surprising ways and surprising veracity and surprising speeds if they have to, if the occasion demands it. COVID certainly demanded that from society, and they did respond. And as a consequence of that experience, when we think about the sustainability pathways and what we can be done into the future, what has emerged are new recovery options that are now available to us in terms of actually achieving some of those objectives much more quickly and much more forcefully than we would have done possibly in a sort of a incremental way in the past in terms of changing the energy landscape or the climate landscape. New opportunities, new understandings of society and the way it responds to crisis has created new gateways for us to achieve the SDGs possibly even quicker than we thought. And we have to harness this new consciousness in society to achieve this. Stakeholders, very important. As far as the delivery of the Sustainable Development Goals is concerned, IIASA has been working with the SDSN network and a project called FABLE, which is a bottom-up measurement process of achieving the Sustainable Development Goals from nation states, and we're collating that information, and that gets fed back into the UN processes for us to assess progress in terms of dealing with the Sustainable Development Goals. We know we're struggling to achieve those goals, but at least we have a clear idea as to what's happening in what spaces of the world, and we can understand what the next steps are in order for us to fast track the achievement of those goals. At IIASA, there are a couple of tools that are relevant for our systems analysis approaches that we apply. I'm not going to read through all of them, but you'll recognize some of them. And it's this combination of tools that you'll encounter when you come and walk through the corridors of IIASA and talk to our researchers around the table. This is really what we offer as an institution. And for anybody that has an interest in some of these areas, please feel free to engage with the Institute. The idea of systems analysis, of course, is a multi-scale issue. It can be dealt with at smaller scales, intermediate scales, but we also have to tackle global problems. And this is a good example of a global assessment where we looked at water management interventions. One of the interesting consequences of this particular piece of work was to illustrate that the more severe your water management interventions are at a broad scale, the consequences are that you're pushing water scarcity downstream, both in terms of the river systems itself, but also in terms of its impact on society. So one has to be very careful in thinking about top-down solutions that have secondary consequences at a finer or a lower scale than necessarily the solution that you may be trying to resolve. This is an example of another international consequences, the air quality work that was done over Delhi. And what came out of this was quite clearly that the air quality problem in Delhi is not just caused by Delhi itself. It is caused by the surrounding environment in the way that the farming community and agricultural community operates, and also even neighboring states in terms of their activities. So the solution to the Delhi air pollution problem is not in the hands of the Delhi government or even the Indian government for that matter. That requires collaboration at a much broader scale, in the regional scale, to resolve this particular problem. And without that collaboration, this problem is never going to be resolved. Another dimension of international systems analysis, this is about population issues that everybody is acutely aware of. Some of the work at IIASA has demonstrated through our population unit that since the 1960s to now, a constant factor has been the migration of people across the world. And about 0.65% of the global population is constantly on the move. It's not increased the percentage, it's not declined the percentage, it's stayed constant. But we also have to have a good understanding about what the real pull and push factors are that either push people to migrate or pull them to migrate into particular parts of the world. Of course, as the population of the world's population increases, there will be more migrants, but it'll still be approximately the 0.65% of the global population. But in order for us to manage this environment and these issues better, we need to have a better understanding of the push and pull factors. Systems analysis has been on the fringe for a lot of the work around the world, and I think what we're trying to do is to illustrate at many scales that it's relevant for coming up with useful and very practical solutions for very real problems. This is an analysis that was done in the Zambezi Valley, where they were looking at issues of water, land and energy, that nexus conversation again. And you can see some of the problems that are faced by the Zambezi community. Low agricultural productivity, high deforestation rates for charcoal production, and there's an energy deficit around the entire area as well. And you'll see at the bottom curve here, at the end of the curve here, that there was a business as usual analysis done. In other words, what we see is a steady deterioration of the entire environment in terms of water delivery, energy delivery, and of course, land use or land deterioration as well. Through using some of our integrated models at IIASA, we could actually come up with 3 resilient pathways or resilient futures for that particular community. Different pathways with different emphases on different time frames, but the idea is that there was a choice of 3 pathways that could be considered collectively and chosen by the community in order to have a pathway that will allow them to have sustainable water supplies, to improve the land use and quality of land, but at the same time also increase the energy availability. So real practical solutions at multiple scales with integrated disciplinary contributions are possible and are starting to change people's lives. Again, about mainstreaming, IIASA has also been involved in informing national and international macroprudential policies. This was in response, of course, to the 2008 financial collapse, where IIASA worked to reduce systemic risk by restructuring the financial networks, and then came up with a solution of a systemic risk tax that had to be included in these networks to strengthen them and to make sure that the kind of collapses that happened in 2008 become less frequent and less harmful at the same time. We at IIASA focus a lot of time and energy on the methods that we use. This is a collection of the suite of models that we have available to look at various issues from air pollution to energy to economics, populations, land use issues, water issues, etc. So the idea is that we put these models together in different combinations, and I think the strength of the work at IIASA is not only that we have these different models, but the fact that we can get them to engage and interact with each other. And that's really what we're trying to do in terms of growing and developing our capacity to deal with systems-based approaches to solving global problems. The particular example about methods has just come out recently. We're working with a private company called SAS, which you may know, to deliver using Earth observation data, a crowd-driven training of an artificial intelligence system to help us track deforestation in the Amazon forest. So the idea is here, and this is quite far advanced already, to have an AI that tracks these satellite images and analyzes them, and can hopefully come up with a system that is near real time in terms of detecting deforestation in particular areas and identifying hotspots where the agencies that are responsible for managing that particular environment can actually engage and deal with the problem as quickly and efficiently as possible. So this is an indication of new data sets that become available as a consequence of using the latest technologies for understanding key systems across the world. Lastly, to finish off for our systems, science for transformation to sustainability is concerned, this is our new strategy. We've put in place, it contains 7 interlinked research themes organized into 6 programs. The key areas of new work that is new to IIASA is focusing on just societies, new economic frontiers, biodiversity, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. And we're launching a number of large-scale interdisciplinary research projects that we conduct together with our national member organizations on shared problems. That's a key feature of the new strategy. There's a focus on increased capacity development, and IIASA in this new strategy, as I mentioned in the earlier talk, will continue to be a facilitator for science diplomacy across the system as a whole. So thank you very much for your attention. Appreciate your time.
Maybe any questions? The desk is open for discussion, please. Next time? Okay. Maybe a little bit late. Okay. Thank you very much again, Albert. Now the second presentation by Panteleev, Andrei Panteleev.
Shall I introduce the next speaker? Okay, so it gives me great pleasure on behalf of the conference partners to introduce Gohar Basigyan from the Eurasian Economic Commission. Thank you very much for coming. Gohar is the director of the Integration Development Department at the Eurasian Economic Commission, and before that she was had various roles within the government of the Republic of Armenia. And so, Gohar, well, thank you for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, dear ladies and gentlemen. I hope that you are hearing me well. I'm grateful, first of all, for this opportunity to share with you my thoughts on today's session, focusing on the challenges of the Eurasian region faces and what role the systems analysis can have in addressing them. I want to start my speech by emphasizing that here in the Eurasian Economic Commission, we understand the value of the importance of systems analysis on such issues as economic cooperation, connectivity, and dialogue in Eurasia. The Eurasian region is so diverse and dynamically developing that expert communities support and continuous presence in these discussions is very fundamental and necessary in order to keep track of the proceedings in this region. Research and expert meeting create the necessary conditions for the further development of dialogue and partnership. Currently, the Eurasian Economic Union is the third largest trading partner of the European Union, which defines the need for continuing cooperation with these two regional integration associations. Perhaps each participant of this discussion today can recall several examples of fruitful interaction projects between the regions of Europe and Eurasia. There is also no need to dig deep to find grounds for mutual interest between the two respective regional integration associations. The Eurasian Union needs European investments and technologies, and among other things is willing not only to act as a geo-economic bridge between the EU and the leading economies of the Asia-Pacific economic cooperation, but also to offer its own solutions for economic development based on high technologies and scientific potential. At the same time, the European Union is interested in the stability of energy supplies from the EIU countries to ensure the energy security. All of this combined determines Europe's interest in a deepening cooperation with the Eurasian Economic Union. And we in the Eurasian Economic Commission looked with great optimism at the project challenges and opportunities of economic integration within a wider European and Eurasian space launched in 2014 by the International Institute for Applied Systems Analysis. This initiative, which was supported by the Eurasian Economic Commission, the European Commission and the Eurasian Development Bank, has become the main analytical platform to unite experts from both commissions, Eurasian and European. In that period, the project provided opportunities for establishing a systemic dialogue between the two integration associations, and at the same time, the need for a deeper study and identification of issues within the framework of the greater Eurasian agenda was recognized. We hope that the continuation of this project would become a starting point for both political and advanced expert dialogue between our two integration associations, because in deepening of this cooperation is interested, first of all, the business of our countries. In every platform, there are lots of issues of cooperation are being discussed. We hear the voice of our business to deepen and to start this dialogue. The freezing of relations occurs contrary to the economic interests of two parties, as I mentioned. And now coming back to the significance of dialogue between two integration associations, EU and the EIU, we cannot ignore the fact that some progress is still underway. There is already an established dialogue in the format of technical consultations, which are continuing no matter what. The business circles, as I mentioned, despite the lack of political will, also maintain their contacts. Accordingly, now we see very different, sometimes even contradictory trends unfolding in Eurasia. The COVID-19 pandemic has, of course, changed the general perception of the nature of international economic relations and even caused doubts on the postulates that are customary for so many of us. As a result of this, a new perspective at the global issues such as migration, the economic security, the concepts of regionalism and integration has developed. In line with these fundamental global challenges, new issues are emerging that require our joint actions. We in the Eurasian Economic Commission realize the interconnection between the global issues and strive to combine our efforts for the sake of contributing to their solutions. The pandemic didn't overshadow the importance of this dialogue. On the contrary, it identified that the weak links that we had, and now the significance of a systemic analysis and analytical approach to the challenges facing our partnerships becomes more and more apparent. I am sure and I believe that IIASA provides a unique platform for all of us, which allows the parties to unite and promote maybe mutually beneficial interests. In such a situation, the project we are discussing, implemented by IIASA Institute and the Eurasian Development Bank in cooperation with the Eurasian Economic Commission, seems to be almost the only effective alternative, thanks to which representatives of the supranational bodies of the two unions can maintain contacts at least at an informal level. Moreover, the nature of the project launched in 2014, which I mentioned earlier, is scientific, and science most often has the potential to work even where politics is powerless. The report conducted within this research initiative allowed IIASA to hold side events on the sidelines of the OSCE ministerial councils in 2017, 2018, and 2019. Therefore, it is very important that the IIASA Institute, touching upon the issues of economic cooperation between the countries of the Eurasian continent, continues and increases its relevance. Once again, I would like to thank for the invitation and for your attention. Maybe any questions, I will be glad to answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. This is really important and useful. I beg your pardon. Do you have any questions? Okay. Let me ask you a question. Thank you very much for your interesting presentation. And your presentation pretty much resounded with the programs Albert van Jaarsveld mentioned. So could you please mention examples? So when you talk about the unique platform of the Eurasian Union for integration with the EU, so could you please share some example? So you mentioned the AI system for controlling the deforestation in the Amazon region. So we know that deforestation is a really important issue, not only for Russia, but for the neighboring countries as well. Well, Albert van Jaarsveld called it systems analysis at the local level. So do you have any examples of this type of cooperation at the local or the global level? So what you've mentioned is really important. It's about the global level. What about the local level? So in Estonia and the neighboring countries. So at this level, do you have any research examples? Thank you.
Спасибо большое за вопрос.
Thank you very much for your question.
На ваш вопрос ответит Дмитрий Павлович Ежов, начальник отдела.
We have Dmitry Ежов, head of department, who can take your question. Okay,
Слышно?
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Слышно?
Yes. Yes.
Спасибо за вопрос. Да, конечно, вопрос был слышен.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, we did hear your question.
Да, слышно.
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you very much.
Спасибо за ваш вопрос.
Thank you very much. Well, for some reason I cannot hear you.
Слышно?
Can you hear me now?
Я могу, я на русском говорю.
I'm speaking Russian. I'm actually speaking Russian.
Спасибо большое за вопрос. На ваш вопрос более детально сейчас ответит Дмитрий Павлович Ежов, начальник отдела международного сотрудничества.
Head of International Cooperation Department. He will give you an answer to your question.
Да, коллеги, спасибо очень.
Hello, colleagues.
На самом деле.
Thank you very much indeed. This is a very good question, and we would look at it from a broader perspective. The joint research IIASA and the Eurasian Development Bank had in the previous years highlighted the demand for the analytical support and maintenance of some topics for the political or expert development between the two associations. And as you mentioned, we have an issue, and so this issue could be analyzed by IIASA experts for other regions. And since these issues are universal, I mean the ones in Eurasia and other regions, so maybe the body of work already performed by IIASA can support the dialogue between the Eurasian and the European unions. Well, at the first stage of this research, we highlighted some joint effort fields which seem to be practically promising. So as a matter of fact, we are in anticipation of the next stage of this research, and we hope that the IIASA expert body of work, considering the universal way of the structure in terms of the experts used and the topics researched, so we believe that the body of work already performed by the Institute can be applied here for developing various pathways for the Eurasian and European unions.
Здесь, может быть, более детально ответили бы представители ИИАСА, которые были погружены в исследование более глубоко.
IIASA experts could give you some more granularity on this because they were deeper engaged in this, but overall, this kind of approach is something we fully embrace. Thank you very much. Okay, do we have any questions or other comments?
Vladislav, do you want me to add, this Albert van Jaarsveld speaking, maybe just add to the feedback that was received here around the Eurasian project, if that's okay? I think I just want to emphasize, first of all, that the focus of the work was not of a political nature. It was focusing purely on those elements of integration that made economic sense at that point in time. So it's about thinking about what are the dimensions of integration that would be of mutual benefit to all partners across the Eurasian region. And so some of the economic trade issues and so on were the focus of the conversation. And I think that's the best place to start, because I think that's where there's a lot of mutual interest from all parties involved at the end of the day. And I think that's what the study is focused on at this point in time. So I just wanted to emphasize that so that it's clear to everybody. And then you also asked some questions about local examples. I don't want to go into too much details, but I think at IIASA we've worked very closely with in a particular study. I'm just pulling one out of the hat now, looking at water security issues around in Uganda, around Lake Victoria. It's a very local problem. It's a very local issue. It involved local authorities in terms of dealing with the problems, but taking a systemic view about water security in that space, it was really, really relevant and appropriate in that regard. And so happy to share any of these examples or case studies with anybody if they wanted to see that. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Good. Do we have any other questions or comments? Okay. Does IIASA plan any European or Eurasian integration for the next 1, 2, or 3 years?
We have started conversations with a number of role players in this regard, because I think it's an area of interest for many players in the Eurasian landscape. But at the moment, we are still in conversations with the Eurasian Development Bank and other partners to see whether there's a way forward to take the study to a next level. Nothing has been clearly tied down. I think at this stage, it's still in a negotiation phase, Igor.
So now you are kind of looking for a sponsor, right, for this project? Am I right?
If you want to put it that way, yes.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions or comments? Ideas? Good. Then I'd like to thank the speakers, Albert van Jaarsveld, Goar Barsigyan. Thank you very much for your interesting and exhaustive speeches. I'm sure that people are still digesting this, and I'd like to thank all our participants and our audience. Thus, we are concluding our meeting. Tomorrow, we'll proceed online, and we'll start at 1 p.m. Moscow time, as far as I understand. 1 p.m. Moscow time. We'll start with comprehensive approaches to solving the global issues of the Arctic and Boreal regions. The moderator will be academician Alexei Gvishiani, who will inform us on some of the things he didn't have time for today. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for your attention. It's my pleasure to see all of you in high spirits and in a sound health. And I wish you the same level of enthusiasm throughout the conference. See you tomorrow.